The silent drift debris field stretched endlessly before Gale Voss, chunks of twisted metal and crystalline fragments catching the pale light of distant stars. His salvage ship, the Wandering Ghost, drifted carefully through the wreckage, sensors sweeping for anything valuable. 37 years of this work had taught him that the biggest scores often came from the most dangerous wrecks. This one was different, though. The ship's hull bore markings he'd only seen in historical archives, the flowing script of the Nethys, a species that had vanished from the galaxy decades ago. Their technology was legendary, worth more than most planets' annual income. Computer, any life signs? He asked, though he expected the usual negative response. Faint biosignature detected in Sector 7 Delta, possibly artificial. Cale frowned. Artificial meant stasis pods, and stasis pods meant potential complications, but they also meant the best preserved salvage. He guided his ship toward the massive tier in the Nethys vessel's hull, his heart rate climbing despite himself. The interior was a tomb of frozen corridors and shattered bulkheads. His breath misted in the recycled air of his environmental suit as he made his way deeper into the ship. The Nethys had been known for their elegant architecture, all curves and organic lines, but death had turned their masterpiece into a maze of jagged edges and collapsed passages. Sector 7 Delta turned out to be a medical bay, its walls lined with crystalline pods. Most were dark, their occupants long since claimed by the void. But one pod glowed with a faint blue light, its surface fogged with condensation. Cale approached. Cautiously, his scanner confirming what his eyes already told him, someone was alive in there. The pod's control interface was cracked but functional, displaying vital signs that were weak but steady. Through the transparent aluminum, he could see her. She was young, maybe 20 in human years, with the characteristic pale blue skin of the Nethys and delicate features that seemed carved from starlight. Her dark hair floated around her face like a nebula, and even in stasis, there was something achingly beautiful about her. His fingers hovered over the revival sequence. Bringing her back meant responsibility, questions, complications he didn't need. But leaving her meant murder, and despite his reputation as a cold-hearted salvager, Cale Voss had never been a killer. The pod hissed open, releasing a cloud of preservative mist. She gasped, her eyes flying open to reveal irises like captured galaxy silver flecked with gold. When her gaze found his, he felt something shift in his mind, a gentle presence that wasn't his own. "You're safe," he said softly, reaching out to steady her as she tried to sit up. "My name is Cale. What's yours?" Her lips moved soundlessly for a moment, before she found her voice. "Sarah," she whispered, her accent musical even in its weakness. I remember you." Cale's blood chilled. They'd never met, he was certain of it. But as her hand touched his arm, he felt the impossible warmth of recognition flood through him, as if he'd been searching for her his entire life without knowing it. "We need to get out of here," he said, helping her to her feet. "This ship won't stay together much longer." But as they moved toward the exit, alarms began echoing through the void, not from the dead Nethys ship, but from his own vessel. Someone else had found the wreckage. Awakening Shadowshara's legs trembled as Cale helped her through the twisted corridors of her people's ship. Each step brought flashes of memory-laughing voices in these halls, the warm glow of Nethys technology, the terror of that final day when everything had gone wrong. Her telepathic abilities, dormant during stasis, were returning with painful intensity. "The Crimson Fleet," she whispered, sensing the approaching ships before Cale's scanners could detect them. "They've found us." Cale's grip tightened on her arm. "How do you know that?" "I can feel their intentions. They're not here for salvage." Her voice carried the weight of old fear. "They're here for me." They reached his ship just as the first fighter craft appeared on the horizon of twisted metal. Cale's hands flew over the controls, powering up engines that had been running silent. The wandering ghost was built for stealth, not combat, but she was fast. As they accelerated away from the wreckage, Zara collapsed into the co-pilot's seat, her mind reeling from the psychic echoes of violence that permeated the debris field. "My people," she gasped. "They're all dead, aren't they?" Cale's jaw tightened. "The Nethys were declared extinct 23 years ago. I'm sorry." The grief hit her like a physical blow, but underneath it was something else, a burning need to understand. Fragments of memory swirled through her consciousness. Her father's worried face, urgent whispers about betrayal, the desperate rush to the stasis pods as enemy ships closed in. "There was someone," she said, pressing her palms against her temples. "Someone who knew about the safe houses, about our evacuation protocols. They led the fleet right to us." Cale adjusted their course, heading for the asteroid belt, where he could lose their pursuers among the tumbling rocks. Betrayal from within? Yes, but I can't remember who. The stasis has left gaps in my memory. She looked at him with those impossible eyes. "But I remember you. Not your face, but your presence. It's like I've been waiting for you." The ship shuddered as energy blasts lit up the space around them. Cale threw them into a spiraling dive between two massive asteroids, the hull groaning under the stress. In the chaos, Zara reached out instinctively, her hand finding his on the controls. The moment their skin touched, the world exploded into shared sensation. Cale felt her fear, her loneliness, the crushing weight of being the last of her kind. But he also felt something else, a connection that transcended species, a bond that felt ancient and inevitable. Zara gasped, her consciousness brushing against his memories. She saw his childhood on a dead mining world, the years of solitude among the stars, the careful walls he'd built around his heart. And underneath it all, she felt his loneliness echoing her own. "What's happening to us?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I've never felt anything like this before. It's as if our minds are compatible somehow." The pursuing ships fell back as they entered the asteroid field, but Cale knew they would regroup. He found a hollowed-out asteroid that had been converted into a black market way station, its location known only to the most desperate smugglers and fugitives. As they docked, Zara leaned against him, exhaustion finally claiming her. "Thank you," she murmured against his shoulder, "for not leaving me." Cale's arms tightened around her, and for the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he belonged. "I couldn't have left you if I'd tried," he admitted. "Something about you. It's like you're part of me now." In the dim light of the docking bay, surrounded by the cold emptiness of space, they held each other close, two souls finding warmth in the darkness. The Hunter's game commander Vex Thorn stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Iron Talon, watching the asteroid field on the main screen. His scarred face showed no emotion, but his cybernetic eye whirred softly as it processed tactical data. 25 years of military service had taught him patience, and patience always paid off when hunting prey. "Sir, we've lost their trail in the asteroid field," reported his tactical officer. "Too much interference from the mining operations." "They're here," Thorne said with certainty. "The Nethys girl can't have gone far in her condition, and salvagers know every rat hole in this sector." He turned to his communications officer. "Broadcast on all frequencies. 10 million credits for information leading to the capture of the surviving Nethys. Alive. The bounty would flush them out eventually." It always did. Meanwhile, hidden in the converted asteroid, Cale paced the cramped quarters he'd rented while Zara slept. The way she'd touched his mind during their escape had shaken him more than he cared to admit. In 37 years, he'd never let anyone get close enough to matter. Now this girl, this impossible, beautiful girl, was making him feel things he'd thought were burned out of him long ago, She stirred in the narrow bunk, her eyes opening to find him watching her. "You're troubled," she said softly. "I can feel it. This connection between us," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Is it something your people could do naturally?" Zara pushed herself up, her pale hair falling across her shoulders. "Not like this. Nethys could share thoughts with our bonded partners, but that required years of preparation, ritual, commitment." She looked at him with those galaxy eyes. "What we have shouldn't be possible." "But it is possible," Kale said, reaching out to touch her face. "And it's getting stronger." She leaned into his touch, and again he felt that electric connection between their minds. But this time, instead of fear, there was something else: desire, warm and urgent and completely unexpected. "Kale," she whispered, her voice carrying a note of wonder. "I've never felt anything like this before. With anyone." He leaned closer, drawn by forces he couldn't name. "Neither have I." When their lips met, it was like touching a live wire. The mental connection exploded into something deeper, more intimate than any physical sensation. He felt her surprise, her awakening desire, the way her pulse quickened at his touch. And she felt his careful control crumbling, the loneliness that had defined him for so long finally beginning to crack. They broke apart, both breathing hard. "We can't," Kale said, though every cell in his body screamed otherwise. "You're vulnerable right now, traumatized." "I won't take advantage of that." Zara's hand found his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart. "You're not taking advantage," she said firmly. "This is my choice. And right now, with everything I've lost, you're the only real thing left in my universe." Outside their refuge, Thorne's ships continued their methodical search. The commander had learned long ago that the universe was cruel, but it was also predictable. Prey animals always made the same mistakes when cornered. They either ran blindly or they found somewhere to hide and convince themselves they were safe. He was counting on the latter. "Sir," his communications officer called out. "We're receiving." A transmission from the way station. "Someone's claiming the bounty." Thorne's lips curved in what might have been a smile. "Excellent. Prepare a boarding party. And remember, the girl must be taken alive. The salvager, however, is expendable." In the hidden chamber, Kale and Zara held each other close, their minds intertwined in ways that transcended physical touch. Neither of them heard the soft footsteps approaching their door, or the whispered commands of the bounty hunters who had sold them out. For a few precious moments, they existed in a bubble of warmth and connection, two souls finding solace in the vast emptiness of space. But the universe, as always, had other plans. Part 4. Memories of Firekale's eyes snapped open at the sound of the door chime, 3 short pulses that meant trouble. He was already reaching for his weapon when the door exploded inward, filling the room with smoke and harsh light. Armored figures poured through the breach, their weapons trained on the bed where he and Zara had been sleeping. "Move and you die," snarled the lead bounty hunter, a scarred woman with chrome implants covering half her face. "You're worth more alive, but that can change real quick." Zara sat up slowly, her mind immediately reaching out to assess the situation. 5 hunters, all heavily armed, and more waiting in the corridor. Their thoughts were focused, professional. They weren't here to negotiate. "Let her go," Kale said, his voice steady despite the plasma rifle pointed at his chest. "Your bounty is for the Nethys, not for me." The lead hunter laughed. "Funny thing about bounties, salvager. They tend to go up when the prey fights back." Commander Thorne's real interested in having a conversation with both of you now. As they were hauled to their feet and restraint cuffs locked around their wrists, Zara felt something stirring in the depths of her mind. The trauma of stasis was fading, and with it, the barriers that had kept her memories locked away. Fragments of the past began to surface her father's worried face, Hushed conversations about an informant, the name of someone trusted who had betrayed them all. The bounty hunters marched them through the way station's corridors, past the curious stares of smugglers and criminals who knew better than to interfere. Their ship was a converted military transport, all harsh angles and functional brutality. As they were shoved into a holding cell, Zara's memories crystallized into horrifying clarity. "It was Counselor Davin," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He was the one who sold us out." Cale moved closer, his presence a comfort despite their desperate circumstances. "Who was he?" "My father's closest advisor. Like an uncle to me." Tears traced silver paths down her cheeks. "He knew everything: our safe houses, our evacuation protocols, the location of every Nethys colony. He gave it all to the Crimson Fleet, in exchange for a governorship in the New Order." The ship lurched as it departed the way station, heading toward Thorn's flagship. Cale reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining despite the restraints. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "Betrayal like that, ... It cuts deeper than any weapon." Zara leaned against him, drawing strength from their connection. "There's more," she said. "Davin didn't just betray us for power. He was terrified of what we might become." The Nethys were evolving, Cale. Our telepathic abilities were growing stronger with each generation. He believed we would eventually dominate the galaxy. "Would you have?" She considered the question seriously. "I don't know. Maybe. But that doesn't justify genocide." The ship shuddered as it docked with the Iron Talon. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside their cell, and the door slid open to reveal Commander Thorn himself. He was tall and lean, with the bearing of a man who had never known doubt. His cybernetic eye fixed on Zara with mechanical precision. "The last of the Nethys," he said, his voice carrying no emotion. "I almost didn't believe it when the reports came in. Your people were supposed to be extinct." "We are extinct," Zara replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "I'm just the epilogue." Thorn's laugh was harsh. "Perhaps. But epilogues can be dangerous things. They have a way of becoming new beginnings." He gestured to his guards, who moved to separate Cale and Zara. "The salvager goes to detention block 7. The girl comes with me." "No," Cale said, struggling against the guard's grip. "Whatever you want from her, you can die quietly if you prefer," Thorn interrupted. "But you cannot stop what comes next. The Nethys threat dies with her, permanently this time." As they were dragged apart, Zara reached out with her mind, her telepathic abilities flaring with desperate intensity. For a moment, she touched every consciousness on the ship guards, crew members, even Thorn himself. What she found in their thoughts made her blood run cold. They weren't just going to kill her. They were going to dissect her, study her, learn how to create weapons that could counter telepathic abilities. Her death would be slow, clinical, and ultimately meaningless. But in that moment of mental contact, she also felt something else: other minds, hidden in the depths of space, minds that carried the familiar resonance of Nethys' thought patterns. Impossible as it seemed, she wasn't the last of her kind after all. And that changed everything. Beyond, the Starshara sat in the sterile interrogation chamber, her wrists bound to the chair by energy shackles that hummed with contained power. Commander Thorn paced before her, his cybernetic eye recording every micro-expression, every involuntary response. The clinical lights cast harsh shadows across his scarred features. "You're stalling," he said, stopping directly in front of her. "My technicians are quite skilled at extracting information from reluctant subjects. But I thought you might prefer a more civilized approach." "Civilized," Zara repeated, tasting the bitter irony. "Is that what you call the systematic extermination of my people?" Thorn's expression didn't change. "I call it necessary. The Nethys represented an evolutionary dead end for the rest of the galaxy." Telepathic dominance was inevitable if your species had been allowed to spread. But Zara wasn't listening to his justifications anymore. Her mind was reaching out, following the psychic traces she detected during her brief contact with the ship's crew. Somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, other Nephi's minds were calling to her survivors who had somehow escaped the purge. Hidden so deep that even they had forgotten their true nature, the interrogation chamber door burst open, and Kale stumbled in, his face bloodied, but his eyes burning with fierce determination. Behind him lay the unconscious forms of 3 guards, their own weapons turned against them. "Impossible," Thorn snarled, drawing his sidearm. "The detention blocks are escape-proof." "Maybe for normal people," Kale replied, his gaze finding Zara's. "But we're not normal anymore, are we?" Zara felt the truth of his words resonate through their connection. The bond between them had grown stronger, deeper, until it was impossible to tell where one consciousness ended and the other began. When she'd reached out to find the hidden survivors, she'd used Kale's mind as an anchor, drawing on his strength and determination. "Your networked," Thorn said, his voice filled with horrified understanding. "She's turned you into one of them." "She's made me complete," Kale corrected, moving to Zara's side. His fingers found the release mechanism for her shackles, and she felt the energy bonds dissolve. Thorn raised his weapon. But Zara was faster. Her telepathic abilities, amplified by her connection to Kale, reached out and touched the commander's mind. She didn't try to control him. That would have been a violation of everything she believed in. Instead, she simply showed him the truth. She showed him the Nethys as they really were, not conquerors or dominators, but healers and explorers, a species that had sought harmony with the galaxy rather than dominion over it. She showed him the children who had died in the purge, the artists and philosophers and dreamers who had been silenced forever. And she showed him the future that could have been, the golden age of cooperation and understanding that had been lost. Thorn's weapon clattered to the floor as he fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the weight of what he'd helped destroy. Tears streamed down his face as he looked up at Zara with eyes that finally saw her as more than just a threat. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." Zara knelt beside him, her hand gentle on his shoulder. "I know," she said softly. "And I forgive you. But now you have to help us make it right." The Iron Talon's engines powered down as Thorn transmitted stand-down orders to his fleet. In the sudden silence, Zara reached out with her mind once more, this time calling to the hidden survivors scattered across the galaxy. Their responses came like distant stars igniting in the darkness. Dozens of minds, maybe hundreds, all carrying the dormant potential of their people. "They're out there," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "Living human lives, thinking they're alone, but they're not. They're part of something greater." Kale's arms encircled her from behind, and she leaned into his warmth. "What happens?" Now we find them," Zara replied. "We wake them up, help them remember who they really are. And we build something new together, not Nethys, not human, but something that honors both." As they stood together in the command center of the Iron Talon, watching the stars wheel past the viewport, Zara felt the future spreading out before them like an infinite ocean of possibility. The Nethys were not extinct, they were evolving, adapting, becoming something the galaxy had never seen before. And at the center of it all was love, the impossible, beautiful connection between two souls who had found each other in the darkness and refused to let go. Together, they would kindle new stars in the void, and the galaxy would never be the same. The last of the Nethys had become the first of something entirely new.